Happy Wednesday, folks. And I have to say that when it's a holiday week, when we've start a week that's a shortened week after a holiday weekend, it's
Happy Wednesday.
Well, it's sort of discombobulating. That is discombobulating too. But it's sort of discombobulating that you don't really realize what day it is because the extra day throws off your, you sort of what's going on during the week. Like yesterday felt like a Monday, even though we had, Labor Day was Monday, and I thought it was Monday, and luckily I wasn't the one saying what the date of the show was yesterday but anyway. Otherwise, I would have done an act and said, "Hey, it's Monday, September." Oh, never mind. Anyway, Brush, you have a pre-show stuff.
Yeah, the curious case of Le'Veon Bell. So here's the thing: it's his right. He wants to hold out and not come into the NFL until week 10 and lose $850,000 a week. That's up to him. Like, that's his right. But what I don't understand is, to me, if you're at odds with the team and don't want to play, then just say you're not coming back and just give up the whole $14.5 million because you don't want to risk salary. You don't want to risk getting hurt, rather.
Well, it's not that, because if he doesn't come back, he owes them a year. He has to come back by a certain.
He has to come back for that amount of time. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's week. I don't think it's week 10. I think it's like week 6 or week 7.
I heard it was like week 10. I thought
okay, if it's week
I
10,
didn't know that was the rule. I thought.
Yeah.
So
he owes them another year if he doesn't come in and play at all, and that's the thing. He wants to limit his exposure as much as possible. And in a way, I mean, I don't blame him, because the Steelers have been have been dicking him around, honestly, for the last few years.
Limit his exposure. Here's my point: he's not going to be in full game shape. The NFL season will be in full swing. They're going to use him. It's not like he could say, "I don't want to play." So they're going to use him. He's going to practice beforehand, and he's going to increase his chances of getting hurt. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. He's better off just playing out this year, and if he has a great year, he'll get paid. I really can't feel bad for anybody, making $14.5 million, whether that's below market value or not.
There were some indications that, in fact, they were going to use him more than they normally did, because I mean, he's one of the best running backs in the league.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then it increases his exposure of getting hurt. And basically what he's trying to do is he's trying to have his cake and eat it too. He's trying to get as much of his salary from this year that he can, and it's because they keep giving him the franchise tag, it's limited, so it's one of the top 5 salaries. And being a running back, where their window, and that's the whole thing. The window of an NFL running back is so limited now because they get beaten up. He's trying to get one more long-term contract with guaranteed money, and it's not going to be from Pittsburgh, because they keep putting the franchise tag over and over and over again, and they're just not interested in giving him the big time money because he's a running back. And I honestly, most NFL teams are like that, and that's one of the things about the NFL that I can't stand.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, there's an equity there, but Peter, at this point, what's the difference if he plays 6 games or 16? Really?
Yeah, well, I mean, what's the difference is the people who take them in fantasy. That's the difference.
Right. Right.
But I mean, I always sort of, whenever I think I understand NFL business model, I always, things throw me for a wrench, because it is so outrageously different than any other league in terms of how they manage these things, the franchise tag, the way the salary cap works, how you can renegotiate deals. It is crazy. And I think, we have all our cap resources in hockey, but go read about the NFL salary cap and how that works. It is complex. Like, the NHL has nothing on it. It's nuts.
It's true. Now, before everybody feels bad for Le'Veon Bell, I just found an article that Ed Bouchette wrote last August saying that Le'Veon Bell nixed a 5-year contract that his agent had agreed on, and he would have been paid more than $30 million in the first 2 years. I'd say that was a mistake, because I don't think he'll ever get that kind of money again.
Well, it depends on what this is.
But it doesn't matter for 2 years.
Wait. This is the strange thing that's going on with the NFL that is sort of related to the NHL, is the fact the NHL, everything is guaranteed. In the NFL, it's not. Only in the last year or so has guaranteed money been a sort of a cherry on top of the sundae that premier players are getting like Aaron Rodgers got a ton of guaranteed money, and that I think has been the crux of the situation with Le'Veon Bell. He wasn't getting guaranteed money, and the Steelers are a notoriously cheap organization.
Yeah, but this was more than $15 million for the first 2 years.
Yeah, but how much of that is guaranteed?
Well, it doesn't even matter. I mean, he would.
Yeah, it does.
No, it doesn't, because he would have already gotten his 15 this year, and then if he thinks he's getting 15 on the open market as a 27, was he going to be 28-year-old running back? I think that's a tough one.
Well, I mean, the only thing I can say is there are a number of teams out there that will spend for honestly, he's on a Hall of Fame track in terms of a running back. That's how dominant he's been. Now, he's got to extend that into his 30s, but that's the kind of dominant running back he has been. And he's not going to get that if all of a sudden he gets his ACL blown out this year because they're running him 30 times a game. So I don't.
Here's an example, and I think our chat room is right. Dan Salvavi says that if Bell isn't, he said James O'Connor's a beast. Bell isn't a Steeler next year. Running back's the easiest position to replace. And it's true. I don't know anybody that's going to give him more than $15 million guaranteed for even one season.
Well, I mean, we'll see. I mean, okay. Let's start the show. We're going to talk a contract of a different nature. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, but we'll analyze it a little bit more with Peter here. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, September 5th, 2018.
I'm Peter Tessier in Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Now I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. It came down yesterday in the morning, Peter, the announcement of a 5-year extension for Winnipeg Jets captain Blake Wheeler. The 5-year deal is $8.25 AAV, not $8.25 million AAV. The two of the first 3 years are $10 million salary, strategically placed for the years where there could potentially be a lockout in the NHL. And I still have not seen a breakdown of if it's heavy signing bonus or not. But overall, what did you think of this deal?
My first tweet when I heard it, I said, did Chevy not learn anything about the Brian Little deal or from the Brian Little deal? And then I sort of started thinking about it and stuff. This is the classic case of you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So whether you think Blake Wheeler is an $8.25 million player, that's sort of irrelevant because someone was going to pay him that. Mm-hmm. And maybe more. That I think is a safe bet. But the challenge is if you believe the Jets, and one of the basic theories is that they have 3 years to get this done in terms of being a contender. That's their window of 3 years. If you have 3 years, you're willing to eat 2 years at 8.25 after if it doesn't work out. That's the curious thing about it. The other thing I think about it is why not find your cap solutions in other ways and then go 3 years and pay him $10 million a year for 3 years and do it that way, because it's the term that's going to kill you on the back end. And that's the thing. So, I mean, okay, that's the first thought. The other thing is then I went and said, okay, well, what is Blake Wheeler? Blake Wheeler is he's a top right winger in the league. If you want, it's top 10 for sure. If you want to put him in top 5, there's people who will argue that and go from there. He had his best year ever, 91 points in 81 games last year. He is, since the Jets arrived in Winnipeg, basically, and that's really when he started because he only played 17 games after he was traded from Boston. He's been a .895 point per game player in his career with the Jets. He's only missed 5 games in 7 seasons, so he's durable. Okay, you're paying for durability. You're paying for almost a point per game player. Last year he was over that. That's fine. But He's 33 when this deal kicks in. He'll be 38 when it ends. I went and ran something on hockey reference, and I put it up on Twitter yesterday, and I put the link in my blog about this. If you look at players over the age of 35, they were 35 as of February 1st in their year, to 38 who played more than 60 games and put up at least 0.89 points per game in any one season. And since year 2000, it's a pretty elite list. Is Blake Wheeler in that category of player? That's, I think, the question you have to look at, because that's the gamble you're making at 5 years. And I'm not sure if he is. I'm not sure that he isn't. And I'm not down on the deal. I'm not jumping up and down about it. But that's the gamble. Is Blake Wheeler this level of player and going to keep this level of production up? And some of the counter arguments I've heard about that, well, if he's a 55-point guy or a 60-point guy in 3 years, what will they be being paid in 3 years? What's their value in 3 years in the NHL? And I think part of the problem is that I don't like that argument, because the GM's job is to find value where he can. And if your best value is to hope, and hope is never a plan, that the guy you're signing is going to be the value in 3 years, when you're talking mid 30s,
right? I
think there's a challenge there. That's where the concern should lie.
Russ, the breakdown of the contract is the first year is after this season, so 2019-20, $10 million, but 4 of that is signing bonus. So base salary of $6 million, signing bonus of $4 million. The following years are all salary, no signing bonus, 6.5, 10, 6.5, and 8.25 for the final year. And I've heard it described that this is like essentially it's a 3-year deal, and then years 4 and 5, this might be a situation where they trade him to a team like Arizona, where he gets buried on LTIR, or maybe they bury him on LTIR because it's not a 35 and over contract. And that's very common nowadays, but I think this is a 3-year deal masqueraded as a 5-year deal.
No, I disagree with that, because there's still going to be a cap number in year 4 and 5 that they're going to have to pay or buy out and pay for the next, X amount of years after that. So it's not like there's no salary. So I disagree with that. I'm sure Winnipeg would have loved to have gotten them for 4 years. If they could have done like a club option or something for the 5th. But I get that he wanted this deal. I like it from the sense that if they're going to win a Stanley Cup, you're going to win it with Blake Wheeler. I don't like it from the sense that in 3 years, if you don't like Blake Wheeler, you're not going to really be able to trade him. He's going to be like Shane Doan's contract. And that's the problem that I have with it. But I don't know if he had any options. I don't know if you could have gotten him for much less. I don't think another team would have given him 5 years, but another team certainly would have given him that amount of salary and possibly more for fewer years. I think that's true. I just, I will say this, though. I remember being at the draft, and they announced Blake Wheeler, and it was like, wow, they actually drafted a high school player. Back then, drafting a high school player in the first round was so ballsy, I couldn't even tell you. And
good point, Russ.
And it's worked out, and it's worked out great. But the problem here is, too, and I'll just sort of reference Keith Hernandez. So, like, they're Indians fans. Apparently, Indians fans hate Keith because when he started to get hurt, it was when he was with Cleveland late in his career, and he was getting paid, a fair amount of money. Here's the thing about Keith Hernandez. He never missed games, right? Blake Wheeler never misses games. You kind of wonder what year that's going to start to happen, because it's just natural. And I do think he's a guy that's been extraordinarily healthy and a really good player. He's not a point-a-game player, but a really good player. I don't know. It is one of those deals where I don't love it, but I see why they did it.
Now,
Russ, I was going to say, to your point, so one of the arguments I heard about Blake Wheeler was he played so few games for a while early in his career. And it was because he went back to junior, whatever it was. And I'm just pulling him up here right now. So he went number 5 overall in the 2004 entry draft. So if you look at the players who went ahead of him, here's something interesting. Same draft year, Andrew Ladd, 920 games played, Blake Wheeler, 778. Malkin is basically the same at 784. Ovechkin went first, was 1,003. Drew Stafford's next at 784. Then you have Zajac at 842. And then you have Mike Green at 787. So comparatively, he's played a ton more than his peers in that draft class. If you go through all the others, those are just the ones, and he's played a little less than only a couple.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's NHL games. So, you know, I don't buy this theory that somehow he's going to have extra legs and his body's not broken down because he didn't play much earlier on. I mean, the NHL is a demanding physical game.
And for those who don't remember, he was, as Peter said, he was a 5th overall pick of Arizona.
Yeah.
He played 3 years at the University of Minnesota, and then he decided to opt out. He took and I don't know if he said he was not going to sign with the Coyotes. I don't know whether he was traded or whether he just went I believe he went as an unrestricted free agent. No, that's right. He went as an unrestricted free agent and signed with the Bruins.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say before that, before he played with the Bruins, he played 44 games at U of Minnesota. The year before that, 44 games. The year before that, 39. And then before his draft year, he played 58 with the Green Bay Gamblers. So, he gets drafted at 18. He comes into the league at what, 22?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's only played 88. He's only played basically about 180 games, not even prior to that. Does that have any kind of effect on the longevity of his career? I don't know. I don't think we've got data on this that talks about, looking at saying wear and tear and how that works. It might be interesting to explore. And Blake Wheeler's durability has been phenomenal.
All right. So I'm going to give you a comparative in just a player who I felt like for the last 4 years of his career wasn't very good. Trevor Linden. So you look at the early part of his career, and he didn't play a ton of games either. He played 5 games in 72, then 67. So it's more than Wheeler, but not a ton because that first year didn't play that much. And he elongated his career. Okay, I don't know if the playing of those games mattered or didn't matter. I don't think there is data. I agree with you on that. But I do know that when he was 34 years old, and again, guys stay in better shape longer here, so I'm giving Wheeler the benefit of the doubt, and I think he'll last a little longer. But when he was 34 years old, he started having years of 36 points, 16 points, 25 points, and 12 points. Yeah. He didn't miss games, 82, 82, 80, 59. Yeah. But he didn't really play well either. And I think they're going to get to that point with Wheeler, unfortunately, because speed is the big deal in this game. Yes. Wheeler is a big guy who does have great speed, but he is going to slow down.
Yeah. And that's been the concern and criticism of another and I think he's a Minnesota native, although I think he's Wisconsin, and that's Phil Kessel. Is that he's been durable. He has not missed a game since the trade from Boston to Toronto in 2008 or 2009. I'm struggling right now, but the point is that once he loses that top end speed, there goes the ball game, folks. And that's why I think the rumors about Pittsburgh trading him were very thick this summer. Now, Wheeler, I don't know when he's going to lose his speed, and he does have the advantage of size, so it's possible for him to convert to a different style and maybe elongate his career. But one point that Elliot Friedman made yesterday in regards to this signing is, sort of a win now mentality on the part of the Jets, where, there's going to be ramifications, and not down the line. I'm talking about, relatively soon. Guys like Matthew Perreault making $4.1 million. The Trouba situation, possibly the contract of a Dmitry Kulikov. I mean, these are decisions that Cheveldayoff has to make, Peter, and it's not going to be something 2 or 3 years down the line. It's probably going to have to be next summer.
Yeah, and next summer you could buy out Kulikov on the final year. Or after, no, not next summer. Sorry, this will be Yeah.
He's got 2 years left. So he buy out
left.
the final year. Yeah.
Yeah, buy out the final year. I'm just not sure that the Winnipeg Jets are going to be a team that is going to use the buyout as often as they can, yet they have used it with Mark Stewart, surprisingly.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you're going to be able to find creative solutions like you always did with Montreal for Steve Mason. And, you eventually run out of those options. And we're sort of seeing that's what's happening with Chicago right now. Like Stan Bowman's running out of options because he's being buried on being married to a core. And now I don't think the Jets are like that. And I'll throw you, and so to sort of throw you another way of looking at the deal, one of the things that was being said yesterday around Jets Twitter was, well, starting next year, you're only at just over 14.5 million for Scheifele and Wheeler on your top line. That's a good deal. Is that the right way to look at it? So that created there's a lot of chatter around that. But here's the thing. You can break down a team's salary cap expenditures any way you want. Like there's a ton of different ways to say, well, you got money here, money there. Our defense costs this, our top six costs that, our bottom six costs this. At the end of the day, there's a finite amount of money that a team has to spend on players. If you have enough contracts that take up space when you need space, you are going to find yourself in trouble. That's just the basic reality of how the salary cap works, base contracts. So it doesn't matter that you're paying Blake Wheeler $8.25 million and Scheifele on a bargain comparatively to output. What matters is if you have enough of these deals, you hamstring yourself. And the Jets now have potentially one with Wheeler, potentially one with Little. That's 2. And they're a little bit hamstrung with Kulikov at $4+ million for a bottom pairing guy.
Right.
What comes next? And then they've got to still deal with Laine, Connor, Morrissey, and Trouba.
Well, here's 2 things. So 2 things. First one is, so Drew in the chat room goes, well, what does this mean for Wayne Simmons re-signing with the Flyers? It means he's not re-signing with the Flyers. Right. I don't know how many times. This deal pretty much sets it in stone that he will not re-sign with the Flyers because he would ask for a similar deal, and there's no way Ron Hextall would give him 5 years. So there's that.
And conservatively, I mean, even if he can't demand 8.25, he's at least going to get what Van Riemsdyk got from the Flyers. He's going to get 7. And there's no way that the Flyers, on top of paying Giroux, on top of paying Voracek, on top of paying JVR, and then have to pay Provorov in the next year or so, they're not going to pay $7 million plus for Wayne Simmons.
No, the second part of this thing is what fans always seem to sort of use as a default, Peter, is, well, don't worry, the cap is going up. At some point, the cap will stop going up, or at least at the rate that it is. And when that year happens, and all of a sudden it either goes down or they say, hey, it's staying the same, then GMs are going to have to – then it's going to be like the hot potato. Then it's going to be like, the merry-go-round stopping. That's when you worry about what Peter just talked about. Yeah.
Or you're betting – and if we see another GM, or even what if Hextall does re-sign Simmons and he gives him a deal considerably? He's not $8 million. He's not Blake Wheeler $8 million, but he's $6 million to someone.
Right.
And he does that. Are we saying, would it be fair to say that some GMs believe that with the battle lines of the next CBA, they're going to have a way to address these expenditures in some form of a rollback, a possible buyout, like we had in 2013, compliance buyouts and stuff? I know we've talked about this before, but if we see a spending trend, there might be reason to believe that they feel there's going to be that option around, because they're willing to take that risk, and ownership has given them that ability to take that risk.
I can't see that. I can't see, and it's anything is possible, but I can't see a compliance buyout being put in as part of a new CBA, simply because from the last CBA, the cap was being implemented. So that was the means of getting out of certain contracts for the purposes of putting in a hard cap. So I don't know whether that's going to happen.
That was 2005. We had compliance buyouts in 2013.
Right, and I know that there were, but it was based on hockey related revenue being allocated as 50-50. There had to be a financial adjustment there, and that was the reason why they had the compliance buyout. But unless there's a rejigging of the amount of the financial expenditure being different than 50-50, I can't see the league or the Players Association agreeing to another compliance buyout situation.
Here's another thing too. So a deal like this going 5 years, certainly this guy would get less money, but like Thomas brought up, and we saw yesterday that basically Jordan Eberle said, hey, the Islanders haven't even negotiated with me. And I'm telling you right now, Lou is not going to negotiate with anybody until he sees results. He is there with fresh eyes now, and they're not re-signing anybody until they see what they can do this year. And that is going to cause some issues, but that's his way.
But that's a risky proposition for the Islanders, because what if like all of a sudden you said Eberle, what about him and Anders Lee is another UFA? What if halfway through the season they're having good years?
Well, then he might negotiate with them halfway through the season.
And Lou comes to him and says, "Let's negotiate," and they say, "Oh, I think I want to test the market."
Well, they could.
Yeah, then the Islanders are screwed, is what happens.
But again, when you've brought in a whole new crew like this, it's hard to extend guys when you haven't seen them. And I think that's what we're seeing. I don't think this has anything to do with Eberle at all, because we haven't seen it for Lee either.
Now, the one thing that and of course I bring everything back to Toronto, Peter, but Scheifele was an extreme bargain of a contract at $6.12 million. Ehlers, I think, was also a bargain at $6 million. So they had the freedom to give a little more, even though it was shorter term than 8 years, to Blake Wheeler. The problem with the Leafs is that Tavares, even though Tavares took less than what he could have gotten someplace else like San Jose, he's still making $11 million on a 7-year deal. Matthews is more than likely, the Leafs want to sign him 8 years, and more than likely it's going to be even with or maybe a little more than what Tavares gets. That makes the Nylander contract, which is still being negotiated, and Marner next year even more important, because if they have to sign them, if they don't take a little bit less like Ehlers did, like Scheifele did, then the Leafs lose all their flexibility in terms of the cap and are wholly dependent on the cap going up to give them room to operate.
At some point they're going to lose cap flexibility. It's going to happen, because the better you are at drafting, the better you are at developing players, means eventually you run out of money.
Sure.
So
it's a guarantee.
I think, yeah, exactly, Russ. Eventually you run out. The other thing here is, you look at Marner. I'm just pulling up some stats on some things here. Marner has some underlying numbers that put Wheeler to shame.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got to pay for Marner's UFA years, and Wheeler just signed for 8.25.
Yeah.
How do you evaluate? I'm not saying Marner's worth $8 million, but it probably bumped him up.
Yeah, but they're going to go, I don't know about that, because they're going to go leadership. They're going to talk about some of those things where it really hasn't been proven whether that isn't, Marner has that effect on a team. I think
and just to give a little bit of an update on that whole situation, and we'll talk about some other things. The indications are Nylander does not want a bridge deal. He wants the long-term deal. He indicated that last month. He's apparently indicated that recently. That's why there's a little bit of a delay here, because I think what the Leafs are doing are saying, okay, you want the long-term security. Well, you're not going to get top dollar. And, they want everybody to take a little less, like happened in Winnipeg with Scheifele and Ehlers. And if they can get that's not saying Nylander's going to be underpaid, but that doesn't mean he's going to make $7 million. It means he can make $6.25, and that $750,000 can be the difference between retaining a player a couple years down the road and not retaining a player. So those dollars count, and I'm assuming the same thing is going to happen with Matthews. Although I get the impression that the Leafs want to get the Matthews deal done ASAP, especially before the next season, because if he puts up ridiculous numbers, it just improves his leverage even more. So it'll be an interesting situation. And the one thing that Elliot Friedman said that I agree with, he believes the mentality in Winnipeg should be, with guys like Trouba, who they may eventually have to move, is let's win now. Let's keep everybody now and deal with it next summer. And if we go down the road of arbitration for Trouba one more year, we do that, and then you let him walk for nothing. I don't agree with that philosophy. I mean, it's all fine and good to go for it, but when you have an asset that you get a ton for, like Jacob Trouba, I just can't see letting him walk for nothing. So,
I think I agree, and we listened to you since December last year about that with Van Riemsdyk. Like, we know your belief on that, and I don't think you're wrong necessarily. I think what Trouba is, with 1 year left of arbitration, he can't call arbitration. He called for arbitration this year, so he's done.
Oh,
the Jets can ask for arbitration, which they won't.
Right.
So they'll qualify him in 10% offer, and he either has to he has to accept it then.
Yeah. And I think what they'll do is they will I think they'll trade him before they qualify him.
Okay.
As I think that's my prediction. And they will work with Kurt Overhart to find the place in the team that wants him, who they can get the right package back from. And I think Kevin Cheveldayoff will give Kurt Overhart a short list of, say, 5 to 10 teams. Let's say 5 teams or maybe 10. Mm-hmm. You tell me what your preferred 5 are. Let's work to get this done. And that's how it's done. Okay. That's what I think it is. And then the next contract, he signs for 8 years with whoever it is, and off you go. Right. That's what I think happens. And the Jets get something back. But, these things, and Russ, I keep going back to my thinking here is eventually the cap determines what you have to do. And it eventually does. And so the optimist on Wheeler and me says, I like Blake Wheeler. I want Blake Wheeler as a Winnipeg Jet, because for the next 3 years, I think you're going to get close to $8 million of value out of Blake Wheeler. I question what happens in the last 2. But what this means is, it's not that you took up the cap space. It's, do the Jets, or in particular, Kevin Cheveldayoff, have the moxie to do the things that you're going to have to do later to keep your cap space and make really hard decisions? What's super interesting about this is, would this deal have even happened had they signed Paul Stastny?
We don't know. Yeah,
we don't know. I mean, it's so this is
worthy of bringing up, because you make a good point.
Right. Like, and we're only thinking of it from a numbers point, right?
Right.
We're not even looking at it from behind the scenes. So what does this mean in terms of ebb and flow with the team dynamic and stuff? But if you were only $500,000 short on Paul Stastny for over 3 years, and and now you don't sign him, were you still going to sign Blake Wheeler at this amount or not? I mean, it's some really interesting questions.
It is.
And if all of a sudden, and I've always liked Brian Little as a player. If Brian Little has a massively big year this year, say he scores 35 goals, sets career highs, I can almost guarantee you he'll be traded, because it'll be the best opportunity to get them a lot back in a deal for him and alleviate the cap ramifications down the line, since he's signed for another 5 years. I know they like him, but there's going to have to be a solution one way or the other down the line, with you paying paying over $20 million a year to your top 3 forwards.
What's Kadri making a year right now?
4-5 for another 4 years.
So he's on a total bargain.
Yes. And that's why he'll never be traded now, because
Little's making about $700,000 more.
Right.
And Kadri's the better player at this point in time, but Little has a ton of value.
Yes.
The question that right now, and I think there's a writer who's about to do a deep dive in on this in Winnipeg, is what we know is Little, Laine, and Ehlers doesn't work. It's just a combo that doesn't fly. So Brian Little on probably 20 teams in the NHL is a solid second line center, and you're happy to have one at 5.1 or 5.2 or whatever he's making.
Right. That's average salary for a second liner. Yeah.
Right. That you're happy to have a second line center at that salary. The problem for the Jets is, and where the criticism's coming is, he might not be your best second line center. And if you're just going to try and force Ehlers, Little, and Laine to work, you're wasting not only Little, but you're wasting the production on the other two. And that's the concern. So how do I guess one of the arguments being made is okay, so you're going to do these things. You got to be open to finding the way to extract the value from them.
Okay, Russ, there's a couple situations involving players who are pending unrestricted free agents. One with our favorite team, the Montreal Canadiens, the other one with Ottawa. Let's start with Matt Duchene.
Yeah, I mean, NHL.com put up a tweet, or the NHL did, saying that Matt Duchene said that he's not concerned that he doesn't have a deal and he would love to stay. And that's pretty much what I've always told you guys. Like, it doesn't matter what the state of the team is today. This guy is from the area. He knows that with these other contracts moving out, they're going to have to pay some players
right
until they get their arena, and he's going to be one of those players that they pay.
Yeah, I mean, well, and that you just said the key words, that he wants to be paid. I mean, he wants to play there, but he also wants to be paid. And with the specter of Carlson being traded, which I still think is going to happen, with the possibility of Mark Stone, he is an unrestricted free agent. He could leave. They have to at least get to the cap floor. And a guy like Matt Duchene, who's a center, who's valuable, who, if he went in the open market, I think would get $7.5 to $8 million a year because he's a free agent center. That's the only reason why. If they get overpaid, Russ. You know that they do.
They do, but I don't think he'll get paid that much. He doesn't have great defense. His numbers have slipped a bit. I think he's going to get like 7.
I mean, he's willing to take. Maybe he's willing to take the hometown discount, but not much of one because they need to pay somebody. But we know how notoriously cheap the Ottawa Senators are, so that'll be interesting. That if a deal does get done, what he gets on a new deal, because we're well aware of what happened with Kyle Turris, and we don't exactly know what the offer was with Carlson, but the rumor was it was $10 million times 8 years, which is not chicken feed, but we know that Carlson's going to make a lot more than that in free agency. So. They've always been a little bit of a penny pinching organization. So it'll be interesting to see what Matt Duchene gets. Well, Peter, you've seen him more than Russ and I have in terms of him playing in the Western Conference. What do you think he's worth on the open market?
It's probably starts at the 6 and goes up from there. Just because he's that level of talent. It's just what you value him at based on the situations he's been in. And I think one of the testaments about that comment from Duchene is who he is. He played through some incredible duress as a player and a person in Colorado. Like, everything was turning on him. His life was up in the air publicly, like the whole mess. And he put his head down and he just went to work and he did his thing. He's in Ottawa. He's in another mess, a bigger mess. And he's like, I just want to put my head down and get to work and do my thing. That's the kind of player you want for a bunch of reasons. Now, whether his on-ice production sort of is where people expect it to be is another thing. But I think you could put Matt Duchene in a whole bunch of teams and you start getting a lot more out of him.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to get a lot more out of him because of who he is as a guy. One of the interesting things about Duchene was when he first came into the league, and I can't remember where I read this, and it was written by a former NHLer on Colorado. And he talked about how Duchene was a live, sleep, and breathe hockey guy. And that's all he wanted to do 24/7 was talk about hockey, breathe hockey. Actually, you know where I read it? It was in Ken Campbell's book, Selling the Game.
Okay. And
it's all about the people, money parents put into hockey to get your kid to live the dream. And he talked about this interview with Duchene and how they had to get Duchene to take a break. And the vets on the Colorado were saying, dude, you got to just step away from the game and just enjoy life a little bit without being in it 24/7 because it'll eat you alive. And maybe he lost that ability for a bit, in particular with the clouds hanging over with Colorado and everything. But Duchene's a heck of a player. I mean, he can skate. He's great down low. He's shifty. He knows how to move the puck, and he's got a nice little shot.
Yeah,
but
But there was a lot of criticism and a lot of sort of consternation in Colorado about his defensive play up the middle to the point that they had to move him to the wing for a time.
Yeah.
And now he's going to play center with Ottawa because that's what they got him for. And they're just going to accept the defensive idiosyncrasies.
But let's also not forget that there's a lot of consternation about a lot of things in Colorado. Look, every player isn't 100% perfect. I mean, you talk to people, they're going to, I talked about Tavares. There's some concern about some of his defensive stuff. But, your best defense is when you got the puck in the other guy's end and they can't get it. And I think with Duchesne, with the right support and stuff, you're going to see that too. He also might need the kind of coach who can teach him a little bit more about that. And look at what he's run through in Colorado as well too. Now, I don't know if he's getting that in Ottawa either, but Duchesne has all the tools. He just needs the right sort of situation, headspace, and awareness about himself to put it all together. But someone would pay for it. I think there's teams that would take a risk.
No, there's no doubt. I mean, in 2016, I did a pretty in-depth interview with him. At that point, he was doing a project, a science project, because his mom's a teacher. And the one thing that he said that really is pretty clear, he goes, I think I made it pretty clear from the time that I started to play hockey that I didn't want to be a doctor or a lawyer or anything like that. I wanted to be a hockey player. And his mom was okay with that. And, at this point, he made it. And he has that kind of mentality. He sets goals for himself. He talks about that. And so I'm very impressed with the guy because really he is unflappable. And I've always, said that I didn't think it affected him at all in Colorado. And I just think his numbers went down, yes, because of, he's not on the greatest team. And so I think that does affect him. But he's not the greatest defensively. That's why I don't think he'll get $8 million. That's all.
Now, staying on the Senators page, Ack and I talked about it a little bit yesterday. I want to get your thoughts on it. He was reporting from a source that Karlsson talks are continuing and that a couple teams in the East, namely the Islanders and Tampa, have sort of re-entered the talks. And my general reaction was they can re-enter all they want. I don't think that the Senators, while they have control over where he's going to go, are going to trade him within the Eastern Conference where it's a bigger embarrassment for him to come into their building. It's now, granted, I think it's going to be what they get in terms of offers. And more than likely, all the offers they're going to get are rental deals, 1-year rental deals. But if the cost, if the price or the return is similar, I don't think there's any way they trade him to Tampa or trade him to the Islanders. They want to get him as far away from Ottawa as possible for as long as possible.
I'll tell you this. I would have normally said that, but now that we're really late in the game, I do think it's possible he could get dealt to the East because it's only for one season.
Well, I think it's a bluff, Russ, is what I'm saying. I think they're using Eastern teams and using more interest to get more out of the Western teams.
I don't know about that. I mean, again, I think they'll try that, but if it's failing, I think he might get dealt to the East because, A, they really want to deal him. They want to get assets, and it's only for one season. I mean, Erik Karlsson's going to have a whole career coming back as a player for some other team. Sure. Daniel Alfredsson came back as a player playing for Detroit. Like, it happens. People in Ottawa will get over it. I don't think it's impossible.
Peter, what are your thoughts on this?
I agree with Russ. I just – the longer this Karlsson thing goes on and they let rumor and speculation go, the bigger the problem's going to be, the more I see Ottawa getting outfoxed on this. And it's like, it's not unlike how they ended up with Duchesne, got rid of Turris, and now have to give up a first-round draft pick this year. Like, I just – when you make business decisions, you've got to figure out what you want, what you need, and then how to best go about doing it. And the one thing that Joe Sakic did in that whole scenario with Duchesne was he figured out what he wanted, figured out what he needed, and then he figured out how to go around doing it. He never wavered from that. It just took long. But what he got for it was they were the outright winner in that deal by a long shot. And I just don't see Ottawa figuring this out right now because they've let so much come into the fold, and they're They're just not as patient, and they don't have the time to be patient. That's the difference. They ran out of time.
Yeah, and I think that that's a factor as well with the Canadians with Pacioretty. There's a report earlier this morning from the Montreal Journal, or Journal de Montreal for those who speak French, that Pacioretty's camp, meaning Alan Walsh, the brilliant agent Alan Walsh, has told Mark Bergevin that
you're turning a new leaf with Alan, Mike. That's nice.
That was heavily laced with sarcasm. Told Bergevin that they won't negotiate a contract once the season starts. So there's this chess game that's going back and forth. I mean, again, I don't think Pacioretty wants to go to camp, let alone start the season in Montreal. And I don't know whether Montreal wants to start the season or have Pacioretty at camp. So,
well, I mean, he wouldn't come out and say that.
Of course.
If there wasn't some truth in he would stay if the deal was right. There has to be a number where he would stay. So clearly he is telling the truth with that, because he does like it there. He has talked about it all off season, how he's loved it there. We all think he's pretty much out the door. But if all of a sudden Montreal came back with a number, he might, there might be a number out there in a number of years that, his agent would say, you know what, we're not going to get that anywhere else. And he might accept that. So I think he just did that so they know where he stands. And so the fans know where he stands. So when the season starts, if there hasn't been a deal, the fans hopefully don't rake him over the coals, because he's basically saying, hey, this is the way I'm operating, and the team knows it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, and I wrote something about the Canadians, or doing a little piece on each team in the Atlantic Division. Pacioretty had scored 30 goals or more 4 straight seasons, and last year he scored 17. His value is at its absolute lowest that it's been in the last 5 or 6 years. And, I believe he's turning 30 this year, or if he may have already turned 30. But, we're talking about teams may be very hesitant to sign him to a long-term deal. It may be similar to the situation with Wheeler, similar to the situation with Van Riemsdyk, who's 29. But he does have value, and I think that unless he returns to that form and scores on a 30-goal pace with the Canadians, I don't think they're going to get any more than they're going to get right now from anybody else, Peter. I think that they need to trade him now, because I don't think his value goes up much between now and the deadline.
No.
I mean, the weird thing about next year when you look at Montreal is, other than Pacioretty, the salaries that fall off are minimal. 2.2, 1.8, a little over $1 million,
Antti Niemi at $950,000. Yeah, it's not much. The contracts they're locked up on are Petrie and Alsner and Shaw, and these are guys who, I don't know. I mean, this is a team in need.
6 RFAs. That's a lot.
This is a team in need of a massive rebuild, and I don't know where they will accept a massive rebuild. I
mean, nobody's, other than Carey Price, nobody's making. Him and Weber are the only ones making any real money, though.
Right, and Weber's on IR, so it doesn't really count until you pay.
Yeah, it's funny you look at the Habs and you say team ready for a massive rebuild, and then you look at the West Coast Habs, the Canucks, a team that should have dealt with a massive rebuild years ago. It's funny, actually, how much further along for two teams that have resisted a rebuild Vancouver might be, given their contract structure and salary cap. Yet you have one group of owners who are completely involved in all aspects of the team, or trying to, and have to get told to butt out. Then you have the other owner, Jeff Molson, who basically tell me what you're doing every quarter. Doesn't, and yet they're so similar in weird ways in terms of results of where they sit. It's funny that Montreal just can't seem to look at the few good things they have in the system and say, how do we get more of this now? And why do you have to make a drama out of everything?
Well, they just don't have enough, though, Peter. Like in 2021, they're also, if we are heading into a lockout, whether they do the opt-out for that or they wait until the following year, they only have 7 players besides Carey Price under contract. So they're in 2021-22, they literally have 4 players and Carey Price under contract. That's it. So they, you're not talking about a lot of money on the books here. So here's the thing. What the fans might not like and what we might not like out of the job that Bergevin's doing, he's making Montreal a lot of money.
Yeah, but
don't say he's making them a lot of money. Go look at the numbers.
Well, I mean, because he's not spending money down the road, but they may not want him to spend money down the road because some of his decisions have been so bad that they don't trust him to spend money down the road. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I mean, so far it's been one PR disaster after another. The Subban for Weber deal, who knows about Domi for Galchenyuk, although, I think Galchenyuk was in a no-win situation in Montreal. The Drouin for Sergachev deal, and then moving Drouin to a position he's not fully prepared to play at, or at least is not as good as he could be playing on the wing. I mean, that's one thing after another. Now, if they rush Kotkaniemi to the NHL as an 18-year-old, that's another potential disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I think all in all, the Montreal organization has been making bad decisions for the last couple of years. I don't doubt they have some good youngsters in their organization. I think Mete is going to be a pretty good defenseman. I think Juleson as well. You've talked about Ryan Poehling as a potential NHLer a couple of years down the line, but when it comes to big moves, they've been dumb. And I think right now in the position that they are in, it's better to tear down and rebuild than to keep patchwork and keep doing patchwork fixes and trying to get into the playoffs, because I don't think it's going to work.
Just remember this. In 2016, they made a profit of $92 million.
Yeah.
That was second in the NHL to the Rangers.
And
they're not profitable. There's almost no reason for them to go out of their way to spend stupid money.
Except the fans want them to win.
Right,
that's the same argument that I heard for years in Toronto, Russ. They're the most profitable organization in the world.
Well, actually, clearly they're not, because that year in 2016, they were probably third on the list, just to say.
Right, but you know what I'm saying. It's like these teams that make multi-millions a year, there's no impetus for them to win. Well, sure there is. They make more money when they do win.
But the idea is, all I'm basically saying is, while that was true in Toronto, something changed, but they didn't have like a singular owner like the Canadians do, so we don't know really what the thought process is there. We never hear what it is.
I think what was at play in Toronto is that the owners who own 80% of the team, I believe, are the two big media conglomerates that own TSN and Sportsnet. And not only is it beneficial for them in terms of making money with tickets and everything else, it's beneficial to their ratings for their companies, because they can charge more in advertising revenue with a successful Toronto team than a team that was dead last or near the bottom of the league. Okay, we don't
hear from Jeff Molson. That's all I'm saying. Like, I wish we did.
Okay, just quickly before we end the show, Peter, you mentioned in the text here in the our chat that a notable name in Winnipeg hockey had passed away.
Yeah, Ab McDonald passed away. He was the first captain of the Winnipeg Jets. He's a 4-time Stanley Cup winner and pretty beloved around here. A lot of strong statements. True North has put one out, and I think he won cup. He played with John Belleville. He won cups in Montreal and Chicago. He was 82, I believe.
Yeah, 82.
First captain of the Winnipeg Jets, scoring the team's first ever goal in the WHA. Played 14 NHL seasons in the NHL. And I'm just sort of looking up some stuff here. And he was sort of an ambassador in Winnipeg. He was born in Winnipeg. So, a little sad. A lot of people in the Winnipeg sports community, particularly some of the older writers who have been around on the beat for Jets 1.0 and stuff, definitely have some interesting tales on Twitter and everything. But, another NHL legend we're losing, and sad, it's a bit of a sad day.
Yeah, I mean, 72 was the first year I started watching hockey, but he only played like 19 games that year. And WHA was not really on TV in New York. So I didn't see too much of the WHA, so I can't really say I saw him. I was aware of him, and yeah, it's sad, but at least he's getting his due. He made a mark, and that's you want to do that as a human being. So he has done that.
And one little final note here from Chris Johnston, who it appears the Seattle group that is likely to get an NHL expansion franchise is just locking things up a little bit. They've added some local minority partners, including the majority owner of the Seattle Sounders of MLS, Adrian Hanauer, and the CEO of Amazon Web Services. So I think they're establishing a larger ownership group here. That just means it's going to be more solid and more financially stable. And I think any question of it, I don't think there's any questions. We're going to see Seattle in the NHL within the year or two. So
yeah, nobody's questioned that. I do want to mention this too. There is a $1.5 billion hub proposal around the Nassau Coliseum.
Oh, yeah.
So again, I don't know what that means for Belmont or anything else. This is the kinds of things that happens on Long Island that just when you think like one deal is locked down, then all of a sudden there's a proposal for another.
Just to quote Al Pacino from Godfather 3, just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in.
Yeah.
I think I saw a tweet from BD Galoff that said the lighthouse light or something like that.
It's just like, it's so weird. I would say at this point in time, it is not impossible that somehow the Islanders end up just returning to the Nassau Coliseum full time.
A 13,000 seat stadium?
No, they'll change it.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, we'll follow that, and we'll talk about some information about Slava Voinov that Ak commented about. We'll talk about that tomorrow on the next edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.